This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
I held nothing back. I was absolutely clear about my belief that Britain is stronger, safer, and better off inside the European Union. But the British people have made a very clear decision to take a different path. And as such, I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction. I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold. The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
And to you, the British public, I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
We set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
One of the most remarkable things about Britain is just how unremarkable it is that 2 generations after my grandparents came here with little, I could become Prime Minister, and that I could watch my 2 young daughters light Diwali candles on the steps in Downing Street. We must hold true to that idea of who we are, that vision of kindness, decency, and tolerance that has always been the British way.
And when I leave the biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife, Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children, who are my pride and my joy. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the Cooler Heads podcast that dials up the political aircon and brings down the temperature. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith, here to show you can be engaged without being enraged.
All while helping you be a political participant, not just a bemused bystander.
So grab an ice cream, find a shady spot and join us for another Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
Today we were planning a special episode to mark one of the defining moments in our political history, the fateful EU referendum 10 years on. But then...
Well, another defining moment in our political history landed with a thud, as Keir Starmer became the 6th Prime Minister in 10 years to become a former Prime Minister.
Politics, it comes at you fast. So today we'll look at both these acts of political tragedy and how they are intertwined. And to help us, we are joined by a favourite guest of ours, of yours, broadcaster and monologue Maharaja, James O'Brien. James, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that, having that.
James, you must be getting quite good at rescripting your shows to account for prime ministerial resignations. Or, pivoting from the vague idea of what you thought you'd be talking about that day to the thing that's going to happen.
Yes.
Have you got a favourite PM resignation?
I think trusses, probably.
Yeah.
Because it was just such a denouement of derangement, wasn't it? It was just so extraordinary.
And so close to her.
Yes, exactly. The ink was still wet on the invitations to her.
I mean, if you were quoting it, you could literally do an ellipsis and move from her initial announcement.
Yeah, it was even shorter than that when you include the period of official mourning, wasn't it? Yeah. It was quite extraordinary. But I think what I loved about it was that it was so bonkers, her entire premiership, that I find this happens to me occasionally, that I begin to wonder whether I'm the one that's mad.
Yeah.
Because you think this is so bonkers, it can't be that bonkers.
Yeah.
I get it a bit every time I see Kemi Badenoch. Yeah. I think that this is so unhinged.
Yeah.
It can't, maybe it's me. And then the fact that she became historically quick to go meant that, no, it was absolutely as mad as I thought all along.
Sometimes I feel like I actually died in 2016, or I entered a very deep coma, and I've been having kind of like fevered coma dreams.
This is like Lost, basically.
Yeah, and then also there was that period of time. Do you remember when Big Ben was silent?
Yes.
And it sort of felt very like, oh, maybe I'll wake up and I'll come out of my coma when Big Ben starts bonging again, and then it did. And things began to feel maybe slightly more normal for a while, but now we're back in the realms of WTAF.
No, the Liz Truss thing was definitely like a stress dream, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to say Margaret Thatcher, just to show how across the generations I am.
I was going to say to show how old you are.
But no, well, partly that. But I didn't really notice that. I was actually sleeping in the stockroom at River Island in Worcester. I was sleeping off a hangover in this little igloo I used to make out of shoeboxes when I'd had a particularly rough night the night before. So I wasn't fully on board for Margaret Thatcher's resignation.
I remember it quite well, actually.
With the tears in her eyes.
Yeah. It is a weird moment when you are forced to acknowledge that there is a person there, actually.
Yeah, that's very true.
You know, even when you don't like them, it's that weird moment where you're forced to acknowledge that there's a person there with parents and maybe kids and, you know.
Yeah, certainly Theresa May would be in that camp for me of, you know, obviously I was extremely anti-hostile environment and much of what she did as Home Secretary. But then she was so visibly moved by leaving office as PM that I did have a moment of, ooh, okay, I have some sympathy for you.
So this is why we keep losing everything. Empathy.
I know.
It's like a, you know, it's a curse.
It's a radical flaw.
Quiet Riot.
When we arranged this recording primarily to mark the 10th anniversary from the EU referendum and to talk about its legacy, we could hardly have hoped for a more eloquent display of that legacy than confirmation that the UK will move on to its 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. For scale, the previous 7 Prime Ministers served for over 50 years. It would be churlish to pretend that Brexit has nothing to do with that change of ratio from 7 to 50 to 7 to 10, especially since at least 3 of them came or went specifically on the back of delivering Brexit. Whether the EU referendum was the apex of pre-existing symptoms or a new infection altogether is, in many ways, a moot point. For most of us, it marks the moment in time when the landscape changed in profound and unsettling ways, the point when Dali took over from Constable and the clock started to melt, when the country had enough of experts, opinion became a more valuable currency than fact, bigotry came back in fashion, just donning the overcoat of legitimate concern, and media decided that gossip was a close enough proxy to accountability. The Brexit side did not expect to win, just stirred trouble. The fact that it did revealed a hitherto untested possibility, confirmed by Trump across the Atlantic, that the good chap theory of government could be overwhelmed if one simply threw enough bad chaps at it.
Nighty-night. Don't let our Brexit dance-a-thon bite. Yes, we're promising not to stop dancing until we leave. Ram Jam, run the rhythm selector.
Absolutely. Here we go.
You better watch yourself.
What is Brexit? It's like this mad riddle. No one's got a fucking clue what Brexit is, yeah? You watch Question Time, it's comedy.
I was voting Remain, and at the very last minute I changed my decision. I go to a supermarket and the banana is straight.
And so if Brexit means breakfast in the UK, then it means Brexit, not breakfast. So maybe I've got a dog's breakfast, yes.
Something monumental happened. It completely changed my opinion on the whole situation.
What was that monumental thing, Mark?
I was kicked in the head by a horse.
We're just not in the European Union. We're still classed as like being in Europe.
So does that mean we won't have any trees?
Cheese?
Trees?
Oh. No, that's got nothing to do with it, though. That's
Why wouldn't we have
trees?
Parliament is, for once, deeply representative of the country. It's completely asunder. Nobody in the country knows what's going on. Nobody in there knows what's going on. And you know nothing about what's going on, even inside the Cabinet. The Cabinet's at sea, the country's at sea. We are a laughingstock.
It should be held accountable for it.
It's a valid point. A lot of people do feel that all politicians...
What is your abiding memory of that result? Who wants to go first?
Well, I mean, I am the face of disaster because I was photographed on the night, just as the Sunderland result came in of the lead there. And there's a photo of my now husband, me, and two other guys, one of whom was a corporate lobbyist, and we were hawking the big screen at the official Remain campaign party. Everyone else was drunk and high on the fact that they thought they'd won. Farage had even conceded, if you remember, at kind of 11 p.m. And then the Sunderland result came in, and the four of us were cephalogically minded enough to extrapolate that Leave were so far ahead in Sunderland. We knew they'd win Sunderland, but were so far ahead that had probably meant we'd lost.
They'd taken it, yeah.
And I saw a PAP lens come under the pull-down TV screen. So I sort of looked away like that. And a couple of the other guys cover their faces like that. And so it means that the PAP gets this perfect shot of Remainers looking forlorn. It was on the front page of the Build. It went into Australian Vogue. Like, that photo went everywhere. So that is one of my memories, because that photo keeps coming back to haunt me. I went home pretty soon after that because I didn't want to stay and be surrounded by people when I was going to be so broken. Went home, stayed up with my husband watching the rest of the results come in. Eventually managed to get some sleep about 5 a.m. until about 7 a.m. And then I thought, well, I'll get up and go to work. My husband had already gone to work. I got in the shower and my knees buckled under me and I collapsed onto the floor of the shower, and like these quite animalistic sobs came out of me that I'd never experienced before, and it was like a grief. And when I look back now on why it made me feel like that and why I'd been so motivated to give up my job and join in the campaign to try and stay in, albeit not part of the official campaign, I was running the campaign for the business lobby group London First that were campaigning for Remain. It was because I felt so viscerally what nasty dark forces it would unleash and it would legitimise. And yes, of course, I'm a Europhile, a Euromaniac even. But it was the motivation for me coming from this is the thin end of the wedge for ethno-nationalism, division and hatred. And that, I think, was that dawning realisation that fucking hell, this is going to be brutal, that really killed me when that result was known.
How about you, James?
I have two thoughts, really. I wasn't quite as engaged in the moment as you were, Naomi. I can't actually remember whether I stayed up or not after Sunderland, because, as you say, the writing was on the wall and I had to be on air the next morning. So I suppose that's the third dimension. It's not an abiding memory, but there's always the shameful part of me that's thinking, well, this is good for business. You know, people are going to be tuning in tomorrow. And in my case, they're going to be tuning in looking for a bit of reassurance and solace, which I would not be able to provide. But I remember picking my daughters up from primary school. One of them told me that an Italian friend had asked if they were going to have to go back to Italy. And that, coupled with a call I took from a French psychiatrist who'd been at work that morning and had been told by one of her patients that she'd have to fuck off back to France now, an NHS psychiatrist. And that was probably my first indication of what you, Naomi, were already aware of, was just what had been unleashed and just how unpleasant it was. And then on a slightly more pretentious level, not long afterwards, certainly that week, possibly that day, I read Dorothy Thompson's Who Goes Nazi for the first time, the essay she wrote for Harper's Magazine in sort of early 1940s in the United States of America, and it haunts me still, actually.
How about you, Alex?
Just picking up on what you said, James, I think I've now fully internalized the fact that I will be very pleasantly surprised if I ever get a pension in this country, let's put it that way. I think we are heading now to a place where, at the very least, I will be denied a pension, even though I have worked and paid taxes here my whole life. It seems to me to be the inevitable direction of travel. I mean, for me, it wasn't on the night, because actually I was spending it with my best friend who is Jewish. And if you're expecting the possibility of bad news, always hang out with a Jew. They will catastrophize right up until the moment you'll be fully prepared. But it was the next morning where, with very little sleep, I watched the press conference of Johnson and Gove. They showed up ashen and morose, not like two people who had just won, but like two people who just realized
we don't have a plan.
That not just that they didn't have a plan, they'd backed this thing for political reasons, thinking they'd come close, get loads of credit, but not actually win. And they knew in that moment they'd fucked the country, you know. My impression at the time is that they looked like the producers when they realized that
they made a hit.
Springtime for Hitler is a hit. And he attacks him and he goes, "You lousy fruit! You ruined my life." That's what it felt like. That Johnson wanted to go for Gove in that moment and say, why did we do this?
Probably the only time that you'd use authenticity and Johnson in the same sentence.
Yeah.
It's probably the only time I've seen him respond authentically to anything.
That's true, actually. It's the only,
raw honesty.
it's the only point where, you know, and even now he's turning out columns saying, oh, you know, you'd have to be a traitor to think that rejoining is the answer. And it's like, shut up, man.
I mean, all of our polling shows that when more people think Brexit has been a failure than a success, and then when you ask the people who say failure why, they say trade and the economy, and when you ask them who do they blame, Cameron and Johnson, even ahead of Farage. Cameron and Johnson.
Oh, for sure.
Quiet Riot. Starting or growing your own business can be intimidating and lonely at times. Your to-do list may feel endless with new tasks, and lists can easily begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything as a built-in business partner can be a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Gymshark, Rare Beauty, and Heinz, to brands just getting started. Shopify has hundreds of ready-to-use templates that can help you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand's style. And you can tackle all the important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to save multiple websites or try to figure out what platform is hosting the tool that you need. And if people haven't heard about your brand, you can get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you, with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns to reach customers wherever they're scrolling or strolling. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. That's shopify.com/realm.
Quiet Riot. Now, a study last week of Bank of England data showed the economy has taken a 6% negative hit because of Brexit. And we have had, I think, near complete acceptance about the economic ways in which Brexit has damaged the UK. I mean, there's an argument as to quantum, basically, but there really isn't an argument that, certainly that it has improved the economy in any significant way. But has there been a reckoning of those other, more intangible ways in which it broke Britain, in the ways it corroded our politics in a sense?
Yes, I think that the triumph of untruth is something that's generational now. I think the fact that they lied, and you can make some excuses for some of the arguments that were made and claim that they were in good faith. I probably wouldn't anymore, but I did for a while believe that they believed ... But once
the sovereignty thing, I think,
it only popped up after the result.
No, but it was.
It's got something in it.
It had been a driving factor for many decades. Let's say.
But even that had sort of jingoistic airs to it, didn't it? When you dug into it, the idea that the analogy I used the first time I met Farage, actually, on a TV show long before the vote. I was just struck by the idea that he'd rather be on a ship that was sinking, saluting a nylon Union flag on the bridge, than be on the finest vessel in the history of the fleet that was crewed, like HMS Victory was, by a veritable potpourri of nationalities and ethnicities. He would rather be sinking on a ship with a Union flag or with a flag of St. George strewn across the bow than be part of the most successful project in history if it involved having foreigners involved. And that is where the sovereignty thing ended up for me. But it is, I think, the way that Johnson came in so fast upon the result and just absolutely blew to pieces any respect for reality or respect for truth. Sunak was much better, obviously, and Starmer was much better.
But don't miss out May. Don't miss out May. So we have George Osborne and Cameron abdicate immediately, right? Having led the Remainers into the referendum, right? We end up with Theresa May, who then does her Citizens of Nowhere speech. And Brexit means Brexit and all that nonsense. So the millions who had been activated to vote for our side were suddenly left completely leaderless. I mean, there was no one. You know, I was working at London First at the time. We'd been the only business lobby group to register with the Commission for Remain. CBI hadn't, IOD hadn't, FSB hadn't. And even we were saying, okay, well, now we've just got to, concentrate on other things. We tried, we failed. And that's partly why I started to get involved with Romaniacs. There's a podcast with Ian and Dorian and Alex and Ingrid and Roz and others, because I couldn't accept that all these people who had been marched up the hill were suddenly completely abandoned.
Yeah. I remember actually a YouGov poll. Actually, no, it was an Ipsos Mori poll the day after the referendum that showed what people sort of expected the result to be. And it was by quite a long majority, it was a kind of Norway-EFTA deal, whereas we would remain.
How would you interpret 52-48?
Sort of thing.
Soft Brexit.
And that included over 60% of people who had voted for Brexit. Yeah. And within 1 month, that had completely mutated to anything other than total disengagement and possibly bombing Paris. Was some kind of betrayal of the mandate. That
because of freedom of movement. Because so many people had voted to get rid of our European friends and family that they could never backtrack on that, which meant you couldn't really negotiate anything meaningful without being like Norway or Switzerland. You would have to have freedom of movement. And I think they didn't. I mean, so many lines, I used to be able to recite them like a kind of schoolboy poetry prodigy. But I can't anymore. But it would be the idea that they needed us more than we needed them. David Davis, who said on the morning after the result, we won't be in Brussels, we'll be in Berlin negotiating with the German car companies, which is a demonstration of ignorance, off the charts levels of ignorance. It would be illegal. It would be against European law to negotiate independently. And they made him Brexit secretary.
The trade deal will be settled over tea, I seem to remember one.
So no, there hasn't been a reckoning. There hasn't been a reckoning over what it's done to the future of the Union of the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Very few people talked about Northern Ireland in the run-up to the referendum. Of course, Scotland now desperately wants to fulfil its Remain vote from 2016 via any mechanism it can, and therefore the independence question gets resurrected within, we're 12 years on from the last one, with the SNP doing well again north of the border. From the constitutional setup of our country to the very real impact it's had on the day-to-day lives of everybody with friends and family who are member state dual nationals or indefinite leave to remain, or who were just here on a work visa, there hasn't been a reckoning about any of that stuff, let alone the Overton window having shifted ever further rightwards with such little anchoring back.
But it's about more than that. It's about more than a sort of movement along an axis. I think there was like a qualitative degrading of the way we discuss things. And it divided the country. It kind of destroyed any notion of losers' consent. It introduced the idea that if you win an electoral contest, you get all of the thing you wanted, and everyone else gets to eat dirt forever. And I think that's in part what has led to 7 prime ministers in 10 years.
And we've had a decade of bad winners.
Yeah. But the
they've been bad winners.
Even of people who voted for Labour was that Labour was going to come in and just pile drive everything that they had wanted Labour to do, ignoring the fact that only 30-odd% of the country put them there. And you can do that when it's a moment in time. You can do that when you're driving towards this one date on which you want your side to be ahead, and after that it doesn't really matter. And every poll you look at quite literally has leave ahead by a tiny peak just for that week, at no point before and at no point after. It's really quite a deep wound now in the way we talk about stuff, because also I think it's created an anxiety in the hearts of progressives that it doesn't matter what we do, we will lose. We will lose to the lies because the other side won't play by the rules.
Yes.
And that, I think, it has a depressing effect on everything we do.
I think you're absolutely right. And coupled with the knowledge that most of them knew they weren't going to be able to deliver any of the things that they claimed, if not before the vote, then certainly afterwards. When Boris Johnson went into Downing Street, he knew he was riding in on a tidal wave.
So
of
it
bullshit.
wasn't just bullshit, it was cynical bullshit.
Absolutely
That's
cynical
the point,
bullshit. And they all knew it. The only one who possibly didn't is our old friend Liz Truss, who by then seemed to have persuaded herself of almost anything that she wanted to believe. But this notion that you could... No one could ever, still now, no one can tell me what they think they want. No one could ever tell me what law it was that they were looking forward to not having to obey anymore. Immigration went up as a direct and probably inevitable consequence of people who didn't need to bring families with them to work here, being replaced by people who did need to bring families with them to work here. And as you say, the idea that eventually the truth will out, the mantra I lived by and lived by then was the Orwell line about truth and untruth. And if you can hold on to the truth, even if you are the only one, you will not go mad.
Yeah.
I've doubted it at times, but it's gravity, isn't it? Eventually, the equilibrium has to be restored. But it's 10 years on now, and it doesn't seem as if it's on any particular horizon.
No, because, the same segment of the population appears to be cock-a-hoop about the man who sold them the previous thing that caused their leg to fall off.
Baffling.
James, we often talk about the media's complicity or, responsibility for getting the result that we got. But I want to ask you, how do you think that referendum result and Brexit itself has changed the media landscape, if at all?
I don't know, actually. I always think of Paul Dacre's sort of hat-trick of horror when he went after the High Court judges with enemies of the people, when he went after parliamentarians with crush the saboteurs. And that is absolutely extraordinary language to deploy in a liberal democracy. And when he went after academic freedom with our Remainer universities. And those three front pages, to me, even by the subsequent standards of the Daily Mail, seemed to plumb depths that I didn't think this country would ever really tolerate or experience. But what has changed perhaps most profoundly as both a consequence of the result and the way that the debate itself was conducted is the old false equivalence, the old impartiality. It started for me with climate change, probably. Yeah. And they seemed to learn nothing. Yeah. And then you had what Emily Maitlis has described as the Minford paradigm, which we all understood. I was doing a few news nights myself at the time, and you would just sit there while they said, and of course, well, with me, I must have told you this. With me, it was Pascal Lamy and Andrea Leadsom. Yeah. When we're doing a debate in the Newsnight studio on what the WTO rules would involve for the United Kingdom.
And Andrea Leadsom...
Pascal Lamy is the former Director General of the WTO, and Andrea Leadsom is Andrea Leadsom. And I have to treat them as equal and opposite forces. And Lamy's sitting there genuinely thinking, what is going on? What is going on? And that was after the result. So they were still... And that's the BBC trying to be impartial. So forget about all the newspapers that didn't even care about trying to be. That was the BBC trying to be impartial.
And it does have ripple effects well beyond the media.
Yes.
There was Trump won anti-Trump march in London. I don't know if you remember it. And I was walking with the women's column.
Inflatable blimp.
That's right. And I was walking with Bianca Jagger actually at the front of the women's column. And I was wearing my favourite T-shirt, more blacks, more dogs, more Irish. At the end of the march, I tried to go into the cafe in Westminster Abbey and I was stopped. And the security guard said, "I'm so sorry, I can't let you in with a political T-shirt." And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, it's just quite a nice message. And he went, "No, I could only let you in if I allowed in somebody from the other side." And I went, right, so if somebody was wearing no blacks, no Irish, that we could both come in. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. I mean, and it was just like, oh my God.
Poor guy, though. I mean, in a way, trying to implement some half-baked instruction that he's being given. But that is it, isn't it? That's the real life equivalent of Pascal Lamy being taught about the World Trade Organization by Andreou.
But I think that was a change, actually, that the referendum brought. I think because the BBC organizationally had not seen it coming, I think it really took its legs out from under it and got it second-guessing its every bit of outfit, its every motive, and got it into the frame of thinking that we must reconnect with these people that we've lost touch with, ignoring the fact that these are people who don't have any interest in the BBC, weren't listening before and wouldn't be listening after, and ended up losing the audience that it did have, that expected some sort of semblance of, if there's something going on and I want to actually know the truth of it, I'll turn on the BBC. And I don't now trust that, James.
I wonder whether the cult of legitimate concerns is a much bigger part of this than even we appreciate. Yeah. And the idea that the lie that these concerns were legitimate when they weren't. And of course, legitimate concerns were almost exclusively about immigration. And the ludicrous notion that if your life in Sunderland has been less than you were hoping for, then it's the fault of a Polish lorry driver or a French psychiatrist. But because that word legitimate got so cleverly inserted into every level of the conversation, that much of the media, what you could call the responsible media, began to think that perhaps these people do need to be reached out to. Perhaps we do need to be building bridges. And the problem with that, of course, is that they cast their votes based upon false information. They cast their votes based upon, at best, disingenuous and cynical politicking, and at worst, blatant dishonesty. So you can't start accommodating people who believe lies without normalizing lies.
It's like a teacher saying, I must somehow reach the kids in the class that are not good at maths by agreeing with them that 2 + 2 = 7. And that's not a basis on which to reach out to people, especially for a state broadcaster. And I think has completely lost its way now. If the BBC were a streaming service, I'd have cancelled it. It's as simple as that.
And it was a bastion of sense. You know, it's why people like Robbie Gibb hated it so much, even as they worked there, because it did undermine all of the very, very well-funded, carefully cultivated, generationally effective propaganda about everything from health and safety regulations right through to immigration. You would just have a place you could go to where even if they had another guest on who was spouting nonsense, you'd at least hear a voice that was making sense, and you would be given enough information to make an informed judgment on an issue.
And they would be treated as an authority.
Bingo.
That's the point.
And that went, that's gone. It's still not come back.
Quiet Riot.
This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao. A gift from Italy to your home. San Pellegrino Ciao is a flavored sparkling water made with real fruit juice, finished with a pinch of Sicilian salt for a perfectly balanced taste. So which flavor will you choose? Peach, lime, blood orange, cherry, or maybe the all-new limoncello? Crafted in Italy with 0 grams of added sugar. San Pellegrino Ciao. Buy it now.
The days are longer, the calendar is filling up, and I want to feel as good as this beautiful summer weather. That's why I've been loving Groons. It's 1 daily pack of gummies that covers my greens, vitamins, minerals, and even has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, so I don't need to juggle a complicated wellness routine on top of everything else. They taste amazing, they're easy to toss in my bag on the go, plus they're vegan, gluten-free, and HSA and FSA, eligible for reimbursement. Save up to 52% off with code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Quiet Riot.
The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision. I will remain in post as Prime Minister until the contest is complete, and I will do everything I can to ensure an orderly handover of power. I will also give my successor my full and unequivocal support, knowing that they will inherit a Britain that is far stronger and fairer than the one I inherited 2 years ago. And when I leave the biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife, Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children, who are my pride and my joy. Thank you very much.
To bring this to today, do you think Starmer has at least began to make a change on that European debate to say that there aren't any upsides? We do need to make it a lot better.
Look, without question, the relationship is in a much better place as a consequence of his tenure and the team around him who have done some very, very good work than it was under Johnson, Truss, Sunak, May even. The relationship is now cordial. There is a growing level of respect and trust for the UK again. Now that is now all in flux because they don't actually know who they're going to be negotiating with. More on that later.
I mean, presumably the lower level negotiating teams will be in place until they are replaced.
Well, exactly, if they're replaced. And I think the summit is now going to be delayed. But I do think that the red lines were needlessly reinforced. I think you can have them going into an election, but my God, they've breached many other manifesto pledges since coming into power. Yeah. And I think that has hamstrung them terribly. I think we have had a far worse economic hand dealt than even they inherited because of Trump, because of tariffs, because of Iran, various other factors, of course, Ukraine, in all of that too, that it would have given them plenty of permission and rationale to flex them earlier. So yes, the relationship is better, but I still maintain that the red lines have hamstrung them.
They had a lot of chances to say we are in a different world now and didn't.
And
what do you think?
Well, there's still the sort of mad wife in the attic as well, in that anything they do is underpinned by our opinion polls and the knowledge that if you're in Brussels and you think, well, we can sort this out and we can sort that out, but come the next general election, the arsonist might be back in charge.
Yeah.
And you know, if the arsonist is in charge, then everything that we've carefully rebuilt from the ashes of the last fire he started, or at least contributed enormously to, will be burnt to the ground again, just as he does a lap of honour. I mean, it's awful. It's the worst possible scenario that the bloke who was responsible for unleashing the worst of the bile and the hatred is riding high in the polls at precisely the time where most of the country has come to a realisation that the last time he got what he wanted, we all lost, we all suffered.
Of course, a more proactive, better politician might think that's actually also a way to hem Farage in.
Well, it should have been. I mean, I think they tried.
Rebuilding enough of that might, if things start going better, might actually be a big point against him.
Yeah, but
to say if he comes in, you go through the whole thing again.
Yes, that would work.
Also, if you'd been able to pull the lever and get the growth in more quickly, you'd be a government that was at least seen to be delivering, even if people hadn't quite yet felt it, although sterling would have rallied and interest rates might have come down. And, he may not be so far ahead in the polls. He may not even be ahead in the polls if they'd been a bit bolder.
What did you think of his resignation? The choreography, I guess, in the speech.
Well, I think we can probably all agree that the people with the loudspeakers have probably delighted us for long enough now, can't we? That in terms of the noise, the ode to joy in the background was unfortunate. But, you've got to be conscious of having enjoyed it at other times when people that you weren't particularly impressed by were trying to give their speeches. So swings and roundabouts. I think, as ever with Starmer, he's at his most human when his back is right up against the wall. And if you could have seen some of that humanity in evidence a little more, and in politics, not just in relation to his family and his parents, then he might have presented a slightly different picture to the public. But I found the list of things that they'd done quite compelling. I thought it was unchallengeable. I thought it was significant. He didn't mention immigration. He mentioned asylum hotels and small boats. He didn't claim that the precipitous fall in net migration that is still ongoing and could see us into zero before the time of the next general election. He didn't offer that as a win, as a victory. And yet that was what, of course, alienated so many of his traditional supporters, was this slightly, extremely right-wing pursuit of minimal numbers, as opposed, regardless of what the impact would be. But I find myself liking him most when he is either today going over the edge or teetering on the edge. That's when he's always seemed at his most authentic.
What about you, Alex?
I think the things that were his huge advantages going into that election became the stone round his neck after it. So the same quality of, flux and not being able to be pinned down and not wanting to upset anyone and being extremely, let's split between the two things, that allowed people to project whatever they needed to project on him in order to say he's a viable enough option to get rid of the Tories. I think they became his biggest failing afterwards, because then it became a lack of vision. When you're not in charge, you can do that. When you are in charge, you have to knock that on the head quite quickly. But I still can't get over the feeling in my gut that he wasn't given a chance. That he never got a chance. I think the timing of that first set of riots
in the summer of 24.
At a time when there were no prison places, where I think really strategically engineered to wind the new government coming in. They didn't really manage to get their feet under the table. They didn't really, and they have been on the back foot ever since. So, of course, this was coming. We knew this. Wimbledon is on now. So I'm thinking about things in terms of forced errors versus unforced errors. There were several unforced errors, but there were also many forced errors. And I think that relentless pressure that started on day one with the entire press corps effectively peddling the idea that how dare these people even be in government, I think it has had a really sapping effect. And I guess now we get to see whether that was personally attached or whether it was systemic about any
Labour government,
non-right. We get to find out if the treatment of Burnham is any different, or whether they will simply, there are fair things to bring up. Rachel Reeves's record in teenage chess tournaments is not a fucking first page for a whole week. Do you know what I mean? That is a journalistic equivalent of fucking upskirting. I'm sorry. At the same time, when they're ignoring just massive bungs coming in from crypto billionaires to the party that's
non-domiciled, non-taxpaying. All of that is true. I still don't know why he wanted to be Prime Minister other than being Prime Minister. I still don't know what he wanted to do with the country. And maybe 2 years was not long enough for me. Maybe I'm too impatient. But as somebody who has professionally been steeped in politics only for a decade, but amateurishly for 20 more, I have got a list as long as my arm of the things that I would do in my fantasy world where I become Prime Minister, which ain't going to happen because I'm not ever even going to be an MP. But I also found it very staggering for Ed Miliband. He had been a SPAD, he had been an MP, he had been in and around cabinet for a long time.
Yeah.
He becomes Labour leader, and then we end up with the Ed Stone, rushed out before the 2015 general election with pretty mad stuff on it that didn't feel like it had a coherent narrative to it.
Do you know what? Someone found the Ed Stone recently and posted a photo of it. I don't know if you saw it. Someone found it abandoned against the wall in some great estate, basically, and took a photo of it. And they were saying that, obviously, a bizarre bit of messaging. But everything on it was pretty sensible. There was nothing on it that was like, what?
But it wasn't like an idea. I mean, Tom Baldwin wrote it, I think. We've subsequently found out it wasn't an Ed thing. It was a panic, shit, we need something, get something out. And I therefore sort of can't believe that a party having gone through that, not sort of 5 years before, would then have another leader with no vision, no obvious idea about what it is that they want the country to be.
I wonder whether we forget what things were like at the time. I wonder whether really he was so focused on sanitising the Labour Party that he didn't really expect to be in a position.
And they didn't expect him to be. And we've talked about this on the show before, that Johnson was meant to be in for 2, if not 3 terms. Yeah. He was a good caretaker who would turn the party around, rid it of the anti-Semitism, make it electable again, and then along comes a charismatic person who might actually win an election. So of course there is that, and maybe he didn't. But I still don't think you put yourself forward to be the leader of the opposition party without really having a bunch of shit that you're quite excited about doing.
Right.
Like, I know I'd do PR. I know I'd try and do land value taxation. I know I'd rejoin the EU. And I never really knew what he wanted. And the reason I raised it, Alex, is because I think the vicious attacks from the media, which you laid out, which are true and real, are easier to weather when you've got your North Star that you're pointing towards and that your supporters get, and they'll forgive some of the other stuff and any indiscretions that the media whip up about you and your wardrobe or whatever else.
I think government is in large part a confidence trick. And I think if you don't have the confidence, and I know people point out that, legacy media don't have the power that they used to. But I keep going back to this notion that they don't individually, but they do collectively. When you walk into Tesco's and you're faced with a wall of front pages, all of which are telling you one thing, you do take that point away.
And it informs what the rest of us do.
Yeah, it happened. So I think their mistake was that they were working on the timings of normal times, because they had assumed that the chaos and flux that had preceded were attached to that spell of Johnson administration. And they thought they would come back and bring normality back. And with that, normal government. So everything they had was like a 10-year plan. Do you know what I mean? If Starmer had come in at the time Blair came in, with that financial situation and in that political environment.
And geopolitical, when Russia was opening up and was,
he might have done terrifically well. But it wasn't a program for now. I think they underestimated just how febrile the entire country felt. And they weren't in touch with
to knit all of that together, it's an absence of, and to take it back to Brexit as well. I remember writing that it was as if that the Remain side had turned up for a gunfight with a pair of boxing gloves and a copy of the Queensberry Rules, And it's still happening now. So the riots, you're right, absolutely undermined them from the start. But there was nothing to stop him going in hard on the rioters and the inciters.
He kind of did.
He tried, but he wasn't very good at it. So it didn't. Unfortunately, style is as important as substance. This is not who we are. This is not what we do. That man is a twisted fire starter.
And then actually you fast forward and you get Peter Kyle saying that, there are some legitimate concerns after the Tommy Robinson thing last year. And this party then morphs from being not good enough in the robust response, although it was, better than subsequently to those first riots, into a party that's actually afraid to call racism racism.
Just do it.
A party with no confidence.
Just do it and defend it.
Back to that.
Do it and defend it. Just stick your
and maybe
stall.
You're right. Maybe that does come back to Brexit, actually. Maybe that undermining of confidence, that it doesn't matter what we do, there is one direction this is heading at, and all we can try to do is make it somehow smoother and softer and delay it.
Well, then get out of politics. Get out of politics, because you go in with your principles.
Which is my whole point. Like, I know why I'm political, what I do. I just don't get that sense from it.
I read today that the most arguable, if you prefer the word immoral or controversial things that Keir Starmer did, he almost certainly disapproved of himself. And that's unforgivable, because now he's gone down without even the solace and the consolation of knowing that he stuck to his guns. And he wasn't, because we're still not entirely sure what Keir Starmer is certain about.
Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot.
James, I recently did a Podyssey episode on Sisyphus. And one of the things we pondered was whether
Would he have been a phone-in host back in the day?
Whether he was simply addicted to rolling the rock up a mountain because he enjoyed watching it tumble to the bottom, which is actually a legitimate interpretation of what's going on. And is that what's happening in the UK right now? We put a tick in a box. It didn't make all our dreams come true, but instead of taking away the lesson that a tick in a box doesn't make your dreams come true, we keep thinking the next tick in the next box.
I think that's probably true of journalism. I think that's probably more true of journalism than it is of the electorate.
The sort of building up.
Yes, and watching the rock roll down the hill and chronicling every bump and wrinkle. Ted Heath was the last Prime Minister to enter Downing Street and leave Downing Street as the consequence of a general election. I wasn't born when he entered Downing Street I was 2 when he left in 1974. So That slightly undermines this theory.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's incredible, right?
I think you're right.
But we still have a sense that that is the normal order of things. You go in on a general election, you come out on a general election. And I wonder whether that lever, that replace leader lever, used to be behind 10 panes of reinforced glass. So to get to it, you had to go in with a sledgehammer, or the person had to be... So Johnson should have gone on 5, 6, 7 different occasions and didn't, because it was still hard to get to the lever. And it's just got so easy to get to that lever now for politicians, let alone the public, and certainly for the media, that we just sort of think that that's now part of the political vocabulary, pull the change leader lever, whereas it used to be a response of last resort. Now it's become almost the thing you do after 2 years if you're not absolutely cock-a-hoop with everything the fellow's done.
It's interesting you should say that. A British friend that lives in Germany saying people there are asking him, why has Starmer gone? And he can't really explain it.
Yeah.
He didn't have an affair. He didn't steal money. There
That's
wasn't
kind
some
of what
big
I mean.
scandal. It's kind of... Things are heading broadly in the right direction.
Immigration has plummeted, which was the big thing.
You can put your finger on.
Yes, you're right.
And so his response is the UK, it's decided to just do another spin of the wheel, see if they get anyone better.
Oh, happy days.
Quiet Riot.
At the time of recording, it looks as though the Parliamentary Labour Party has little appetite for a contest, with Andy Burnham set to be crowned leader by the second week of July. If that happens, he will be Prime Minister at the time of the next EU summit, which is meant to be on the 22nd of July in Brussels.
God, that's crazy.
But what will Andy Burnham's EU position be? Will it be the version from 2016?
These are our friends and neighbours, not our enemies. We have been through a lot together. My great-grandfather, my mum's grandfather, Edmund Burke, was a private in the King's Liverpool Regiment. He was descended from Irish immigrants who came to this city to work on the docks, and he lived less than a mile from here on Commercial Road. I'm very proud to say that he was an early Evertonian. My grandmother's only memory of him was coming home from Goodison Park on his last visit here from the Western Front and performing Irish dancing for him with her sisters. That was 100 years ago this year. He returned to the front soon after, and in September 1916 was taken prisoner of war at the Battle of Guillemont. He died in a concentration camp on October the 28th, 1918. 2 weeks before the end of the war. I want to read to you a passage from his last letter home to his brother Walter. Well, Walter, I'm in touch with Irish Division, Dublin and Connaughts, and I had a good talk over Old Ireland. Walter, there's thousands of Irish boys here, and may I tell you, it is God help the Bosch if they come across them. And then they say Ireland is not doing her share in this war. Ned's words are a reminder that so many of us Brits have immigrant roots. Peace in Europe now seems to be taken for granted. It is asserted that there will never be a return to the tension and conflict of the past. If Ned was fighting for anything, it was against nationalistic aggression and for peace in Europe. If I think now about how I would honour my great-grandfather's sacrifice, I am in no doubt that it is to carry on fighting for a more united, less nationalistic Europe.
Or the version he set out a couple of weeks ago in Makerfield. Meanwhile, Wes Streeting, who has now pulled out of the race to be leader, having, well, triggered it, has continued to talk up UK membership of the EU, calling it the new special relationship, and looks set to be given one of the great offices of state. If you listen to that Burnham speech from 2016, guys, it is, to my ears, undeniably one made by a true Europhile.
Yeah.
He is married to a Dutch woman. His children presumably are dual nationals, just like Nigel Farage's. What's your gut telling both of you about where you think his EU policy credentials will land him? Where do you think he'll end up?
Oh dear. I don't know that it's going to be very different from Starmer for all of the reasons that we've been discussing, because they're frightened. He will probably try to appease the unappeasable, which is the mark of the last 2 years, is that we can't afford to scare those particular horses. You heard it with the Makerfield comments that you just played.
Yeah.
We're a little bit too scared. Well, imagine what the Daily Express front page will look like. They've just got to, at some point, somebody has got to turn around and say, fuck you all. We're going to do what's best for the country, and I'm backing myself to explain why it is. I'm not sure Andy Burnham is that man, although I am fairly confident that he knows that's what's needed.
I don't know what his position will be on any foreign policy issue, to be honest, which is quite a bit of a worry at the moment.
I mean, we talked to Emma Harrison about what his position on electoral reform will be last week, of course. We don't even know that.
But as you know, I am an optimist.
Yeah.
And so I am totally willing to believe and accept that, as I've been explaining, a bad start is very difficult to get over.
Yeah.
And maybe a good start is actually something that you can roll with.
Yeah.
And, you create a little bit of a surf and you get on it with your board, and things can go well for you for no particular reason that you can put your finger on.
We might win the World Cup.
Exactly.
These things matter.
And the Iran war seems to be heading towards a resolution, and Ukraine is doing better. So you could be looking at this magical landscape where in 6 months' time everything is sort of magically resolved.
Through no effort by Andy Burnham whatsoever.
But that's politics, isn't it?
That's politics.
That's lucky generals.
Right.
Lucky generals.
So I don't know what his position will be. He is a better communicator. That means he has the weapons in his arsenal, should he choose to explain and provide leadership in the direction that we need. Whether he will choose to, I don't know, because I think this terror of the particular demographic of voter that Labour think they will turn against them is very deeply ingrained. Mm-hmm. And their inability, their refusal to acknowledge that really for 3 decades they've had a different kind of voter. Yep. Mm. They are in power, not because of that traditional voter that they have in their mind, but of a different kind of voter, and they're in the process of losing that voter, which is even more important to them. I don't think they get it. I really don't. I've met very few MPs who genuinely understand that. They all try to kind of split the difference.
And the problem with the voters they have got is that we are broadly defined as people who think that there should be a better distribution of wealth. But when you're given an opportunity to actually have a bit less wealth in order to affect that distribution of wealth, a lot of us get spooked. And I don't think I do, but I am conscious of the constituency that we describe. I think there's one element that might be really interesting, and that is the capacity for personalities to change. Because everybody's queuing up to remind us that Andy Burnham was a big part of why Jeremy Corbyn became Prime Minister. I mean, it's extraordinary, that list of people who all thought it would be a wizard idea to make sure the left felt properly represented, throw them a biscuit, let Jeremy run, and then lo and behold, he becomes leader of the Labour Party and Andy Burnham heads for the hills. But it's 10, 11, 12 years ago, some of that, 11 years ago. And I think it's possible he has really changed. I think that it may be that he has been affected by being Mayor of Manchester and will not vacillate in the way that he did do when he was in Westminster, and may have a slightly clearer idea, in contrast to what you said about Starmer earlier, of what he wants and what he thinks needs to be done. Yeah. And I can join you, Alex, in optimism by saying that so far there seems to be a kind of depth or bottom to him that wasn't always the case when he was in cabinet. And if...
Also, he's more experienced.
And I mean, shallow though it is, I also think, and I really mean this because it's going to sound glib, but I just categorically mean it. I think that the way he talks helps. I think having a northern accent helps. Having a mode of expression helps.
Being human.
Yeah.
I mean, just watching him on Saturday and Sunday. It was
emotions,
like, wow,
not looking as if you're embarrassed by your own emotions.
No notes and just the fluency in the he knows what he wants to say. He feels what he wants to say. I don't know if you managed to
listen on Sunday, but I did say that I think people underestimate just how much of a skill it is to want to interact with people, to look comfortable when you're chatting to people, to look like you want to answer journalist questions. You know, that was Blair's real superpower. And I remember some backwater press conference in Canada where some trade deal was being signed. And he was in the room with those journalists for an hour and a half, going at the end, anyone else? Do you have anything you want to ask me? Are you sure? Because that's the bit of the job that he enjoyed, and that's the bit of the job that he did well.
Yeah.
If we can get a little bit of that can go a long way. But in terms of policy, I mean, I'm not sure I'm looking at a power brain here, but maybe he will surround himself with good people. We know that Miata Fanbule, who was, of course, a regular in the show, is closely
advising him,
and
She'll be in his cabinet, I'm sure.
She knows it all backwards. So.
And Best of Britain's former press officer is now running his comms, so that's all great.
Do you think the summit in July will go ahead?
No, I don't.
You don't think
so?
It will?
Look what we've got. So look, remember, Burnham didn't want what Starmer's done. He wanted the summer. You've also got the Greater Manchester mayoral by-election happening.
Yeah.
And Andy Burnham cannot be seen to have feathered his own cap by winning Makerfield and then not having a hold for Labour in that mayoralty. And the Greens will be gunning for it.
Timing of
that's been moved. We now know that's happening a week after the summit is due to take place. And as we've been going into we're recording this on Monday, the EU are beginning to make murmurings that they think it would be better to delay. They want to know with whom they are properly negotiating. Okay. They will want that
I think that's fine. I don't think there's a particular...
Because the main negotiations, the tunnel, as we call it, happen from now until that summit date.
Yeah.
And if none of those people are going to still be standing on the other side, then...
Very warm message from von der Leyen.
Yeah, very warm message.
She obviously likes him personally.
I suspect the summit will be delayed, and I think that gives Andy Burnham a little bit more time to think seriously about what his EU position is going to be, to maybe recalibrate from the Makerfield message back to something a bit more sensible.
And you've put out quite a big report this week, haven't you, that can help with that?
Yeah, so... At Best of Britain, we commissioned Frontier Economics, who, of course, do a lot of modelling for the government on things like the growth you can get from a third runway at Heathrow, etc. I asked them model customs union, single market, membership, and the Farage further divergence. And it is extremely clear that for Manchesterism or anything that Andy Burnham wants to do around reindustrialisation to work, it is a complete non-negotiable hygiene factor that you need the growth from actual membership. So 92 billion on offer from membership. Single market gets you about 70% of that, and customs union really gets you very little at all.
Wow, in pounds, that's almost half of what you'd get if you close the Strait of Hormuz.
Very clever. So, look, it's the scale of what EU membership offers that I think becomes the irresistible lever to pull, particularly when you combine it with where the politics are at. And obviously we've already done the polling prior to releasing the econometrics that shows that progressive bloc of voters who are broadly pro-European, they are the only ones still prepared to even consider voting Labour, because the Leave voters, the Reform, they're not coming back to Labour. They never really were voting Labour. That is the complete red herring. They're holding their nose at the moment for the current position. They continue to hold their nose for customs union and single market. They only come out and give you that political dividend beyond the error margin when you say membership. So I think what we've been able to demonstrate to anyone talking about single market, which the Lib Dems seem to be talking about and moved on from customs union, or people in and around the Labour leadership, and certainly now we've got the lovely number of how much the economy would shrink if Nigel Farage was to get his way on Brexit, is both the economic and electoral dividend that you get from membership, which you simply do not get from any of the other options.
James, I know your callers are a self-selecting sample, but they are a trackable sample.
Yeah, well, yes and no.
Because, but you know, your phone lines are open to the same sorts of people all the time.
Of course.
Do you get any sense of where the voters are now? Like, are the defenders of Brexit quite as vociferous as they were?
I don't. They don't call me anymore. So I will get calls from contrite leavers, but they are, by almost definition, going to be better educated and more thoughtful people than the ones who used to ring me to shout about all the brown faces on the tills in Tesco's. Right. They don't ring me
Does
anymore.
Sarah Pochin call a lot?
Sarah Pochin is yet to ring into the programme. And what do you remember, June Mummery? The fishing woman. She used to ring in quite often, but again, she hasn't rung in for a very long time. One doesn't want to sound condescending, not by accident. I'm happy to sound condescending on purpose, but the idea that somebody who has been either led into a position by dint of pretty base prejudices, or who has been conned into a position by very, very effective snake oil salesmen. They are the hardest people ever to convince to recant. So the only people who will express remorse are the people who were knife edge in the first place, and the people who can say, I honestly thought we were going to get whatever it was, $1 million a week for the NHS, or I honestly thought that we were going to get a Norway type deal, or I honestly thought that we were going to end up like Switzerland. You're never going to get anybody who honestly thought that David Davis was a man who knew what he was talking about, that Boris Johnson was a stand-up guy, or that Nigel Farage was in any way, shape or form honest. None of those people are ever going to recant because they've invested too much in it.
But nor are those people going to vote Labour.
Yes, well, I'd never hear what they're saying in terms of what they think they've won. They're just still celebrating how unhappy people who understand things were after the result came in.
And nor are those people ever going to vote Labour.
No, not now. They may have voted Labour once, but they're lost forever.
Exactly. Whereas the people that are still prepared to do that are really in a very, very, very different place. And I often hear from, I'm involved in a lot of discussions about electoral strategy of the progressive parties, and you'll often hear the refrain of course, one vote, one back from reform is worth two. And not if you're losing 4 to the Greens. It's very basic mathematics here, and they never ever give you that follow up.
It's what John Curtis keeps saying.
On that point, I think one of the most recent polls said 4 out of 10 Labour voters still think Starmer has done quite a good job. So, what's your view that this creates a kind of ready-made reservoir of voters who will view Burnham a bit suspiciously? I mean, has that been factored in adequately, or...?
I don't think it's been factored in at all.
Okay.
I think it's interesting that the thinking seems to be that everyone hates Starmer, and I don't think that's the case. Certainly, I interact with a lot of people who are very pissed off at doing the thing that they really didn't want the Labour Party to do, quite aside from Starmer, seeing this spectacle repeat itself that they thought was vile when it happened under Johnson, then Truss, and seeing it repeat, they're really put off. And quite a lot of them are saying, I'm not voting Labour again if they're going to play at this kind of thing. And I hope it's a very small portion of people. I hope we don't have a repeat in a way of the transition from Corbyn, where you really did have quite a, you had a group of people that were very hostile to whoever was going to take over, simply by dint of the fact they weren't Corbyn. So I don't think Starmer has the capacity to command that kind of personality cultish devotion, but I think that a lot more people are pissed off about this than all those who have planned the takeover seem to realise.
I think Starmer has agency insofar as he can be gracious or not. I don't think he could unleash the sort of levels of bitterness and recrimination that you describe. But I hope that he does that and doesn't cite the ghost of Ted Heath twice in one episode. I hope he doesn't do a Ted Heath and spend the rest of his career sort of mithering and wallowing in bitterness and and unfairness. But I think the biggest constituency of Labour supporter is the one that does believe Starmer is more sinned against than sinning, but also feels that this had to happen. And some of the messages and calls I've taken that are most simultaneously...
Which is, I think, all of us as well, isn't it?
I think so. Persuasive and depressing is the idea that it's not fair what's happened to him, but it has worked so effectively that he has to go. And
the threat to fascism is so real.
Yeah, that's a big part of it as
so fast coming at us that you have to just accept that this guy ain't going to win the next election, and it's better to try somebody else now to fend off what Mail was becoming. Is what I'm hearing from a lot of people.
That's where people are coming from. There's two outwardly very, very, very different events that I think as the dust settles will assume more and more resonance. One was the digital IDs, which went overnight from being a really popular policy to being a really unpopular policy by dint of the man who introduced it. It was his name and fingerprints on a popular policy that rendered it unpopular overnight. And that, I think, will have cut quite deep in the parliamentary party, even though it wasn't that big a deal at the time. And then in terms of the country and the idea of Starmer being in such a deep hole he can't get out of it, even though he didn't dig much of it himself. For me, it was the story about the male prostitutes, or the claim that the arsonists were male prostitutes who were unpaid, that wasn't just bubbling away in the dark corners of social media. It was I might say these people don't ring me anymore, but they message. I still get texts. Why aren't you talking about that, you client, John? And you're just sitting there thinking, I now live in a country where significant numbers of people have been persuaded, because it's always something that's been done to them, that the Prime Minister's property was set on fire while his sister-in-law was still in it because he hadn't paid the male prostitutes for their services. And you just sort of think, back to where you started, what's the chuffing point of anything if you're going to be having to try to harvest the votes of half-wits like that? And those two things make his position impossible. Made his position impossible. Plus loads of others.
Because both point, I guess, to the fact that there was a large group of people that were willing to believe the worst version of events about anything he does.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
At the time of recording, it does look like a coronation. That might change. Full caveat to listeners out there that somebody may yet emerge from the back of the PLP.
Look at today, right? Burnham gets on the train and he's declaring his intention to trigger a leadership election.
Meanwhile, Starmer says,
half an hour into his journey, Starmer has announced his resignation. So he announced that he will fight for the leadership. And an hour later, Streeting has withdrawn. So it looks as if there's not going to be any kind of...
But who knows? There may be.
Yeah.
But I'd love to take your pulses on this. I've done a Blue Sky post about it and have had quite... mixed reaction, probably anti my position to it. So I'd like to ask both of you, would it have been healthier, or would it be healthier to have a contest? Or do we just need to get on with this because the country doesn't need a summer of flux?
What do you think I will say? Go on.
I think you'd prefer a contest.
Okay.
I think, I come down on contests.
I would have to say 99 times out of 100 I would prefer a contest.
But not
this time.
I really don't. Just because I look at the process of the previous election and every question that was asked of that incoming leadership, they managed to somehow box themselves in and limit their options for when they get into government. So I don't want to see a bidding war on any issue, actually. Really? I don't want Burnham. I think he has the potential to have a really massive advantage by coming in on vibes and being able to actually implement anything. That is to trust his intentions. But he has been around a long time. And although he's not my favourite politician, I don't think he's a bad guy.
No.
Same. I allow myself one or two I don't knows a week. I'll vacillate a bit on this and say it depends who's in it. So if you get some either well-meaning or egotistical non-entity coming forward in the unlikely event of them getting 81 votes and saying, I really feel in the interest of democracy we should have a battle, then no, I don't want a battle. But I don't know whether I was the only one who noticed that Angela Rayner didn't mention Andy Burnham's name in her farewell note to Keir Starmer this morning. Sort of 10 minutes after Wes Streeting said, I'm your man, Angela Rayner posted a very... I felt compassionate message. I don't think some of those names that have been bandied around.
A female Labour Prime Minister would be nice, wouldn't it?
Well, yes, it would be nice. And you're not going to get a better candidate for that role than Angela Rayner from many optics angles in a long time. So I don't know, I'm afraid, is as I said, the thing I allow myself every now and then.
So I think he'll win no matter who else runs.
Yes.
And I do think that he would be a stronger leader and have a stronger mandate if he had to go through a quick contest, if nothing else. This is a government elected on a third of the popular vote 2 years ago that has now changed leader. I think they overestimated wildly, and I didn't mention this at the top of the show, but they won because everyone hated the Tories, and because there was very efficient distribution of target seats between the Lib Dems and Labour. So tactical voting was very easy in 2024. It wasn't some amazing campaign and wonderful manifesto that got them 150
It was still an incredible
majority.
5 years, though. To come from being 22 points behind
sorry, I'm not
to winning that kind of majority and I don't think anyone
I'm now talking
can take
about,
that away from
I'm
Starmer.
not taking it away from Starmer. I'm talking about Andy Burnham's mandate to govern and trying to give him the best possible start at turning this country around so that we don't end up with Farage in number 10 in 3 years' time. I think it's a shame for him not to have a contest. because I think it would strengthen his premiership.
Maybe
and I also think that
52-48, I agree.
I think we should have an airing of vision.
We've got to have something to hold him to.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
I think arranged marriage in this case is much better
I can see both
than
arguments.
dating for a while.
I can see both arguments.
Yeah, I just, I'm terrified of a Farage-led government.
Yeah,
and
I think
want
we
the
should
incoming
clarify
PM to
that.
have as much.
We should clarify that, because obviously we all are. And bearing in mind that all these people have had to celebrate for the last 10 years is the discomfort of people like us. My perturbation at the thought of a Farage government is born of the knowledge that it will make everybody's life much worse. Probably not mine, but my job will hinge upon being one of the people that can chronicle how awful everything is and spend every day, as I've done for 10 years, shouting "I told you so" from the top of Big Ben. But for the people who are least able to absorb further economic damage, for the people who will be most affected by the end of by net migration moving into negative, because there won't be anybody to look after them when they're old or to care for. They won't be able to afford the sort of services that the metropolitan elite, or whatever you want to call them, will be able to afford, albeit at inflated prices. The objection to the idea of a Farage government is because it will make absolutely everything worse, not just for brown people.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, right here, right now, I think the Farage project is in a lot of trouble.
Yes, I do too.
But that
so does
doesn't
he,
mean they
which is
don't-
why he's
yeah.
very, very, very quiet.
That doesn't
at the
mean
moment.
they don't have the capacity to recover
No, and cockroaches
find
can survive
another.
nuclear war.
And the Tory party is phenomenally good at politics, wants power, it can shapeshift too. And that's why I say reform-led, because I think, as things stand at the moment, we could easily see a REFCON.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be. I have to say, my experience of this country in 30 years is that you can kind of stretch it this way or that, but then it vaguely snaps back to the shape it remembers. And
I wonder.
I have to say, I think in 3 years' time, we'll be looking at a contest between Tories and Labour with everyone else on
I'd take that.
10-ish%.
I'd take that.
I think that's what we'll see. I think that's what we'll see. So, first call to action, obviously, go and read the report.
Yep, we'll leave a link in the show notes.
That you've put together.
And we've done a brilliant
really
little...
good summary as well. So if you don't have loads of time to look at tables and graphs, which I always do, I have to say, because I love them, but there is a really good executive summary that you'll get. But what else?
We've got a little tool that automatically sends an email to your local paper, because that is critically important, suggesting that Andy Burnham reads the report and takes it into consideration, because most of the growth that comes from EU membership, of course, is benefiting the North. And if he is the king of the North and he wants, reindustrialisation and all that comes with it for those areas, then really he needs to focus on this. And secondly, all of this costs a huge amount of money, and we have very, very little resource at Best for Britain. So if you can support our work, and you can either make a donation or become a supporter by visiting our website, bestforbritain.org/support.
She's in rags, dear listeners, in rags she is. We came here and found her eating dust.
Thank you. And that's it for this fairly historic episode of Quiet Riot. Let's hope it's a few weeks before the next bit of history, eh?
Indeed. It won't be, you know that. And listeners, if you feel a pang of pain on our behalf because of the political chaos we're trying to juggle, or perhaps a glob of gratitude even, then please head over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod, where you can support us for the price of a 3-course meal in the 1970s.
We look forward to welcoming you back on Thursday, when perhaps we'll know a little bit more about the shape of things to come. And then we'll be back at the weekend with Sunday School to wrap up all the other dramas we'll have missed this week.
All that remains is to thank our guest, who somehow manages to be here always on these historic occasions.
It's a curse. It's a curse.
There is no one literally I'd rather spend this day with.
Thank you. I've had a ball, as always.
And don't forget our sister shows, Podyssey and Behind the Lines. They've become a must-listen for a very good reason.
In the meantime, we love you more than a cold drink on a very hot day. And that is a lot.
Bye.
Quiet Riot.
Quiet Riot is an audio production from Cooler Heads, written and produced by Andreou, Naomi Smith, and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu, and edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.